Kissing and other strategies for successful communication. A case study on communication between Nordic and Chinese business people. Using English as a lingua franca. Kissing och andra strategier för framgångsrik communication. En fall study om communication mellan nordiska och kinesiska affärsmän och kvinnor som använder engelska som lingua franca. Johanna Rixer, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. English. English 3, Degree Paper in Linguistics. 15 HP. Supervisor, Solveig Granath. Examiner, Marie Takvist. Spring 2016. Title, Kissing and Other Strategies for Successful Communication, a case study on communication between Nordic and Chinese business people using English as a lingua franca. Title På svenska, Kissing och andra strategier för framgångsrik communication, en fall study. Om communication mellan nordiska och kinesiska affärsmän och kvinnor. Som använder engelska som lingua franca. Author, Johanna Rixer. Pages, 28. Abstract. This is a case study on the communication between Nordic and Chinese business people using English as a lingua franca in their business communication. The aim of this paper is to establish if misunderstandings in communication occur between Chinese and Nordic language speakers, Finnish and Swedish, in a business environment and, if they do, what the nature of these misunderstandings is. In this paper, recorded conversations are analyzed to establish if there are misunderstandings between the parties. The recordings were made at a global industrial company in Sweden and in China. Interviews with the participants were also carried out in order to establish their own ideas concerning the communication flow and to find out if the participants are themselves aware of using any particular communication strategies when interacting with one another. The results of the case study show that there were some misunderstandings in the communication between Nordic and Chinese business people. However, there were not any particularly serious misunderstandings with respect to the company's business aims and objectives. The results indicate that the parties use communication strategies to enhance their messages and to determine if a message has been conveyed successfully. The strategies that were commonly used were confirmations in the form of follow-up questions and speaking slowly. Written or nonverbal communication were found to be used as a supplement to verbal communication. A strategy that the participants themselves noted as successful was keeping their messages short and simple. This is also known as the KISS principle. The result of the study indicates potential misunderstandings caused by the Chinese using yes as an act of active listening rather than agreement, and it is suggested that an awareness of this cultural difference may help improve the intercultural communication between the parties. Keywords, communication strategies, English as a lingua franca, ELF, business English as a lingua franca. BELF, intercultural communication, active listening, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Sammanfattning på svenska. Det har en fall study som rör kommunikationen mellan nordiska och kinesiska affärsmän och kvinnor som använder engelska som lingua franca I sin affärskommunikation. Syftet med uppsatsen ARATTA om det uppstår missförstånd I kommunikationen mellan kinesiska och nordiska talare, svenska och finska, IETT. Internationellt företag och om det händer, vilka typ av missförstånd som uppstår. I uppsatsen analyseras. Inspelad samtal för att undersöka om några missförstånd uppstår mellan deltagarna. Inspelningarna gjordes på ett globalt företag I Norden och Kina. Dessutom gjordes intervjuer med deltagarna för att ta reda på deras egen uppfattning rörande kommunikationsflödet och för att ta reda på om deltagarna själva är medvetna om att de använder några särskilda kommunikationsstrategier när de interagerar med varandra. Resultaten AV. FULLTEXT01 visar att det förekommer vissa missförstånd I kommunikationen mellan de nordiska akta. Kinesiska affärsmännen och kvinnorna, men att missförstånden intearav särskilt allvarlig karaktär. Studien. Visar även att deltagarna använder vissa kommunikationsstrategier för att förstärka meddelandena och för att försäkra sig att meddelande har uppfattats korrekt. Vanlig förekommande strategier är bekräftelser I form av uppföljningsfrågor och att tala långsamt. Skriftlig eller icke-verbal communication används som ett supplement till den verbala kommunikationen. En strategi som deltagarna själva uppmärksammad som framgångsrik var att hala meddelandena korta och enkla. Detta är även känt som kissprincipen. Resultatet. Pavasar majaliga missförstånd som uppstar på grund av att koncerna använder ja som ett sat att indikera. Aktivt lyssnande och inte som en bekräftelse. Det forslas att medvetenhet om denna kulturella skillnad förbättra interkulturell communication mellan de olika parterna. Nicolord, kommunikationsstrategier, engelska som lingua franca, elf, business English as a lingua franca, BELF, intercultural communication, active listening, kissprincipen. Contents. 1. Introduction and aims. 1. 2. Background. 2. 2.1 English as a lingua franca. 2. 2.2 Communication strategies. 3. 2.3 Active listening. 5. 2.4 Reasons for misunderstandings in intercultural communication. 6. 2.5 Politeness and face. 7. 2.6 Previous research on communication between expatriates and locals. 8. 3 Methods. 9. 3.1 Interviews and observations. 9. 3.2 Data collection. 10. 3.3 Company. 11. 3.4 Participants. 12. 3.5 Ethical considerations. 12. 4 Analysis and results. 13. 4.1 Linguistic misunderstandings. 13. 4.2 Language barriers and the potential for brokers. 15. 4.3 The KISS principle and other communication strategies. 15. 4.4 Active listening. 18. 4.5 Awareness of the importance of successful communication. 19. 4.6 Saving face. 19. 5 Conclusion. 20. References. 23. Appendix A. 25. Appendix B. 26. Appendix C. 27. 1. 1 Introduction and aims. China has the second largest economy in the world, and many Western companies aspire to gain a foothold in what is also the world's largest market. Today, there are 500,000 foreign businesses established in China too, and English proficiency has become increasingly important to the Chinese population. Multinational companies depend on well-functioning communication between their international departments, where English is commonly used as a bridge language, also called a lingua franca. According to Bolton and Graddall, 2012, little research has been done on the use of English in China outside of the educational environment. Current knowledge about other uses of the language within China is limited. And, given this, the opportunities for researching Chinese Englishes are many, as relatively little research has been done outside universities and colleges. In particular, there is an evident need to carry out more ELD-based sociolinguistic research. Bolton and Graddall 2012:7. Globalization has made the importance of well-functioning intercultural communication a Key concern for many organizations. In line with Bolton and Graddall's suggestion that further research outside the academic sphere is needed, 2012, this study analyses conversations and intercultural exchanges in spoken English within a global company in situations where English is used as a lingua franca. The parties are Nordic and Chinese employees in a global industrial company. This qualitative case study seeks to establish if any misunderstandings occur during the conversations. The study also examines what communication strategies the parties use to determine that their message has been understood by their interlocutors and if any cultural differences affect the understanding. This study is based on recordings of business meetings. The conversations were recorded and followed up with interviews. This study seeks to answer the following research questions. Do misunderstandings occur? Do the participants use any particular communication strategies to determine that the other party has understood the intended message? 1 http://www.cebr.com/weld-2 2 https://www.gov.uk 2. Do cultural differences have an impact on understanding and misunderstanding in the communication? In summary, the aim of this case study is to establish if there are misunderstandings between the Chinese and Nordic business people in this specific global company when using English as a lingua franca, if the parties use communication strategies in their interactions with one another, and if the cultural differences are of relevance to the communication. It is hoped that the results of the study may contribute to improving intercultural communication in general, and within global companies in particular. In addition, this case study can provide data that may help to establish what problems Nordic and Chinese business people are likely to encounter when communicating with each other using English as a lingua franca. 2. Background. In the following sections, important concepts and previous research relevant to this study will be discussed. English as a lingua franca will be discussed in 2.1, followed by communication strategies in 2.2. Next, active listening will be discussed in 2.3, followed by politeness and face in 2.4. Misunderstandings in intercultural communication will be discussed in 2.5, and previous research on communication between expatriates and locals in 2.6. 2.1 English as a lingua franca. As mentioned, business is increasingly a global affair and there is an unambiguous need for clear communication both within and between companies whose businesses are spread over the world, and whose employees and customers speak different languages and come from different cultural backgrounds. When speakers of different native languages need to communicate, there is a common practice of using a third language as a contact language or bridge language as an effective way for the parties to reach a mutual understanding. When English is used as the parties' mode of communication, it is referred to as English as a lingua franca, abbreviated ELF, Seidel-Hofer 2005:339. According to Oxford Dictionaries, online, the expression lingua franca stems from the late 17th century, originating from Italian, literally meaning Frankish tongue. Earlier it was recognized as a trade language, commonly used as the main language of diplomacy and commerce in the area surrounding the eastern Mediterranean Sea. 3 http://www.oxforddictionaries.com/definition/english/lingua-franca. 3. Lingua franca, n. 1620s, from Italian, literally Frankish tongue. A stripped-down Italian peppered with Spanish, French, Greek, Arabic, and Turkish words. It began as a form of communication in the Levant. The name probably is from the Arabic custom, dating back to the Crusades, of calling all Europeans Franks. Sometimes in 17c. English sources also known as Bastard Spanish. 4. In recent years, in addition to being the leading lingua franca in the academic world, English has become a fast-growing choice as a lingua franca in corporate communications and international business, Lustig and Kuster 2013:281. In the case of business English, business English as a lingua franca, abbreviated BELF, is used as an additional term. BELF distinguishes English as a lingua franca in business contexts from other uses of ELF. Charles 2007:264. Boehringer et al. 2008:27, defines BELF as a reduced English, where the shared goal is to reach a mutual understanding. In these circumstances, the sender of the message has an increased need to verify that the receiver has understood the message. The idea is that, to get this verification, the sender employs a number of communicative strategies in order to avoid misconceptions and to make sure the intended meaning has been conveyed. Bjorg 2010:201. This is of direct relevance to this case study as one of the research questions concerns communication strategies within the conversations analyzed. Before examining the specific types of communication strategies used by participants in the study, it is helpful by way of background to understand the area of communication strategies more generally. 2.2 Communication strategies. The term strategy is defined in military terms as the art of planning and directing overall military operations and movements in a war or battle. 5. In non-military settings, the concept is applied to a plan of action designed to achieve a long-term or overall aim. 6. One could suggest that all language users use strategies, consciously or unconsciously planning how to organize new information and perform new tasks. Communication strategies can be defined in both a broad sense and in a narrow sense. In a narrow sense, they can be defined as the techniques one uses when facing problems in the process of achieving a communicative goal. However, in the broader sense, communication strategies refer not only to the problem-oriented techniques but also to the general techniques one employs to attain a special communicative goal. Yang and Guy 2010:57. Examples of this could be the rhetorical strategies of repetition and exaggeration, which are often used by politicians to make their speeches more persuasive. In a broad sense, communication strategies include affinity seeking. 4. http://www.etemonline.com/index.php?search == franca. 5. http://www.oxforddictionaries.com/definition/english/strategy. 6. http://www.oxforddictionaries.com/definition/english/strategy. 4. Strategies, anxiety-reducing strategies and a vast number of general persuasive strategies. Both non-native and native speakers sometimes struggle to find the appropriate expression or grammatical construction when attempting to communicate their meaning. Yang and Guy 2010:58. The term communication strategies is generally credited to Larry Salinker, who used the term in a 1972 article, in which he explained the processes involved in the field of interlanguage. Salinker 1972. Ellis, 1985:12, suggested that communication strategies are psycholinguistic plans, which exist as part of the language user's communicative competence. They are potentially conscious and serve as substitutes for production plans which the learner is unable to implement. A study by Kaur, 2011, shows that communication strategies often emerge among the participants of a conversation. In addition to self-repairs, other Emptive measures include the use of various interactional practices such as repetition, confirmation and clarification requests and the like, which allow the participants to check, monitor and clarify understanding. Kaur 2011:98. Lustig and Kuster, 2013:281, acknowledge the importance of intercultural competence in language use. The scholars further explain that intercultural teams often develop strategies in order to reach a common understanding and that they pay extra attention to clarifying their ideas and explaining their thoughts as a means of reducing linguistic misunderstandings. This is of direct relevance to the study as the conversations analyzed are intercultural interactions. Communication and getting one's message across can be a difficult task, even when two parties share the same native language. The Shannon-Weaver model of communication from 1948 illustrates this, see Figure 1. Figure 1. The Shannon-Weaver model of communication, based on communicationtheory.org. 5. According to Figure 1, noise is considered anything that can disturb the transmission of the message. Although this model, which was first applied to the field of telephone signals, has received criticism for viewing communication as a one-way process where the receiver is passive and where focus is on the sender getting the message across, it is still used in various communication fields and is also relevant to the analysis in this study. When researching ELF, with the help of the classical communication model, any language problems which might arise function as the noise. Kaur, 2011:95, acknowledges three varieties of communicative breakdown within ELF. Communication, partial understanding, non-understanding, and misunderstanding. Partial understanding is when a receiver understands parts of the intended message and non-understanding is in the context of a listener not making sense of the intended meaning. Misunderstanding is the definition used when the listener makes an interpretation of the message that is comprehensible to him/her but is not the intended meaning of the sender of the message. When parties with different native languages use English as a lingua franca, there is an increased risk of misunderstanding. Not only may they have different levels of competence in English but they lack shared background knowledge and assumptions. One strategy which is particularly relevant, as the title of this paper suggests, is the KISS principle. KISS is an acronym for Keep It Simple, Stupid, or alternatively Keep It Short and Simple. For the purpose of this study, the latter is the term suggested as a communication strategy. The KISS principle claims that most systems work best if they are kept simple, rather than made more complicated. Simplicity should therefore be a key goal and unnecessary complexity should be avoided. 7. 2.3 Active listening. Bjorg, 2010:201, describes active listening as a form of a back-channeling behavior in business negotiations in which English is used as a lingua franca. Interest can be conveyed to the speaker by using both verbal and nonverbal messages such as maintaining eye contact, nodding one's head and smiling, agreeing by saying yes or simply to encourage the interlocutor to continue. By providing this feedback, the person speaking will usually feel more at ease and therefore communicate more easily, openly, and honestly. There is potential for confusion when yes is used as an active listening tool in situations where the speaker may incorrectly assume that the listener agrees with what is being said. 7. http://people.apache.org/fhonic/kiss.html 6. 2.4 Reasons for misunderstandings in intercultural communication. Two fields of research relevant to this study and which are closely related, English as a lingua franca and intercultural communication, often give different explanations as to why misunderstandings occur. According to Kaur, 2011:98, research within ELF reveals that Cultural differences do not seem to be of great relevance for misunderstandings. In Kaur's study, in which 15 hours of spoken conversations were recorded, it turned out that there was not one misunderstanding due to differences in cultural background. There were a few language-related misunderstandings, but the main source of the misunderstandings could be traced to uncertainty in the speaker's articulation. It is suggested that the diminished role of culture in such interactions stems from the lingua franca context of the interaction. Intent on arriving at mutual understanding in a language that is native to none of the participants, cultural differences are tolerated and often overlooked as the participants negotiate and co-construct understanding in the lingua franca, Kaur 2011:93. However, intercultural communication studies by Scollin et al. 2012, demonstrate that cultural differences are important elements in causing misunderstandings. Both Kaur, 2011, and Moranen, 2006, on the other hand, insist that there is no causal link between misunderstandings and differences in cultural background. Cultural differences in the use of yes are discussed in Lustig and Kuster, 2013:280, where there is an example from a study with an American employer being frustrated by not getting an urgent report from an Asian member of staff in time, despite the fact that the manager perceived that the initial message with directions had been very clear and his member of staff had replied yes to these instructions, Lustig and Kuster 2013:280. Whereas Kaur might consider that linguistic differences are more likely to cause misunderstandings than cultural values, the cultural difference in the value or meaning of yes in American versus Asian cultures would seem to be a prominent cause of misunderstandings. It could well be that there are differences in the yes that could be traced to different usage of active listening, see 2.3. The different interpretations when it comes to the importance of cultural differences in interlocutors' backgrounds are relevant to this case study, particularly the question of cultural versus language-related misunderstandings, and will be further presented in 3.3. 7. 2.5 Politeness and face. One important aspect of cultural differences relevant to this study are the varying degrees of politeness and face in different cultures. Brown and Levinson, 1987:61, addressed the issue and concluded that politeness involves us showing an awareness of other people's face, wants, and face refers to our public self-image. There are two aspects to this self-image: one is positive face, the other is negative face. Positive face refers to the want of every member that his wants be desirable to at least some others. Negative face refers to the want of every competent adult member of society that his actions be unimpeded by others. Brown and Levinson 1987:61. In analyzing the recorded conversations in this study, it was useful to have an understanding of linguistic politeness and the cultural values which govern its use. Paul Grice's cooperative principle and maxims are useful in understanding linguistic politeness in relation to how politeness acts enable the participants of a conversation to cooperate with each other. Paul Grice, 1975:45, cited in Yule 2010:147, listed 4 maxims to support the cooperative principle. 1. The quantity maxim: make your contribution as informative as is required, but not more, or less, than is required. 2. The quality maxim: do not say that which you believe to be false or for which you lack adequate evidence. 3. The relation maxim: be relevant. 4. The manner maxim: be clear, brief and orderly. In China, linguistic politeness studies did not begin until the early 1980s, Huang 2008:96. According to Chinese History and Traditional Culture, Gu, 1990, traced the origin of the notion of politeness in the Chinese culture and has also formulated politeness maxims, which he believes are suitable to the Chinese environment. Gu suggested that there are four basic aspects of the Chinese conception of politeness: 1. Respectfulness, 2. Modesty, 3. Attitudinal warmth, and 4. Refinement. In Chinese, these concepts are defined as limao. Respectfulness is one's own positive appreciation or admiration of another person, concerning the latter's face and social status. Modesty can be seen as another way of saying self-denigration. Attitudinal warmth is one's demonstration of kindness, consideration and hospitality to others. Refinement refers to one's behavior toward others, Gu 1990:239. Huang 2008:96. 8. 2.6 Previous research on communication between expatriates and locals. An expatriate, often shortened to expat, is a person temporarily or permanently residing, as an immigrant, in a country other than that of their citizenship. The word comes from Latin ex, meaning out of, and patria, translated as country or fatherland. The term is commonly used in the context of professionals sent abroad to work, Castri et al. 2016. Peltocorpi, 2007, studied intercultural communication patterns and tactics used by Nordic expatriates in Japan. The study looked specifically at 1. How differences in communication style, national culture, and language influence intercultural communication in Nordic subsidiaries, and 2. Tactics expatriates use to increase the frequency, depth, and spread of intercultural communication, Peltocorpi 2007:73. The results of the study revealed that 1. Misunderstandings were common between the Nordic expatriates and their Japanese colleagues, and that challenges included styles of communication, cultural differences, and language barriers. Peltocorpi points to these factors to explain communicative difficulties with the interaction between the expatriates and local employees. The study further showed that, 2. The Nordic expatriates tended to use communication tactics, strategies, such as networking with local managers informally and taking communication into consideration in the recruiting process. They started requiring a high level of English proficiency for the Japanese, and knowledge of Japanese for Nordic personnel, in the specification of requirements for new members of staff. There was also a strategy to let the different nationalities share physical space, Peltocorpi 2007:73. Networking theories support the strategy of shared space, as propinquity is an important factor in creating networks. People are more likely to connect if they are geographically near each other, Kadushin 2012:18. Peltocorpi's Japan study also showed that limited language skills within a company acted to funnel communication flow through those employees with the best skills. In the study, there were just a few local managers with English skills who acted as communicative links because of their relatively superior language ability, Peltocorpi 2007:71. These links are also defined as brokers, Kadushin 2012:57. Positive aspects of having a broker include that they help information flow, foster social integration, and function as a bridge between networks. However, it is worth noting that brokers are not always something positive for an organization. A broker can accrue a great deal of informal power within a company and become considered irreplaceable. Brokers may also manipulate their position and start using communication for profit and cash in favors when needed, Kadushin 2007:57. 9. Whilst the field of communication and communication strategies is broad, the background Information provided in this section highlights those concepts most relevant to the results of the study. In particular, an understanding of communication strategies, active listening and politeness and face prove useful in analyzing the results of the recordings. 3 methods. This is a small-scale case study and it consists of investigations in natural situations. The settings would exist even if the study would not, and similar settings continue to exist after the study has taken place. Denskum 2014, Chapter 3. Denskum, 2014, Chapter 3. Acknowledges that the strengths of case studies are that depending on the circumstances in each case, there is the option to use a variety of methods. For the purpose of this study, observations and interviews were chosen as methods. The reason for choosing these 2 methods was that they were found to balance each other well. The interviews are based on what people say they do, which could be what they believe they do, what they wish they do, and also what they want people to think that they do. The observations, however, are based on what people actually do in the situations under investigation. The next section presents interviews and observations in 3.1, followed by how the data for this study were collected in 3.2 and provides information about the company and informants in 3.3 and 3.4 respectively. Ethical considerations are discussed in 3.5. 3.1 Interviews and observations. In interview settings, the participants are aware of their data being used in research and the agenda is set by the researcher insofar as he decides the topic and the questions. Denskum 2014. In addition to giving this information orally, it is also advisable to put it in writing in a consent form. This was done in this study, see Appendix A. As Denskum, 2014, Chapter 12, observes, when choosing to have interviews as a research method, it needs to be taken into consideration that the necessary people may be difficult to access. As the top manager in the company in this case study was very positive to the study and made himself as well as his staff available, it was possible to collect valuable information from the participants using the interview method. Furthermore, it was time efficient, as the interviews could take place directly after the observations. The interviews were semi-structured, which means that there was a list of prepared questions for the participants to answer, see Appendix B, but there was some flexibility in terms of the order of the questions. 10. As well as flexibility towards the participants. They were able to develop their arguments and opinions as well as add topics and speak more widely and freely. The interviews were given in a one-on-one environment. Denskum, 2014, Chapter 12, lists the advantages in choosing this type of interview setting. The views stem from one source, it is easy to control and it is easier for the researcher in the transcription process as there is only one voice. Whereas interviews are structured and controlled, observations occur in the natural setting in the field. However, as Denskum, 2014, Chapter 13, states, the researcher must be aware of some concerns when doing observations. One must make a note of not disturbing the naturalness of the setting, and it is very important to make the presence of the observer have as little impact as possible, as the presence of the observer might alter the naturalness of the situation. 3 aspects needing extra attention to make it possible to preserve the naturalness of the situation when using observation as a research method are: 1. Positioning. The researcher should be positioned so that he does not intrude, but still has a clear overview of the situation. 2. Avoiding interaction. The researcher should be invisible and not engage in the meetings. And 3. Time on site. The longer an observer is on site, the less the effect on the proceedings. Denskum 2014, Chapter 13. I solved this by making sure that I positioned myself in the background of the participants. I did not interact or comment on anything during the meetings, and I stayed on site through the entire meetings. Denskum also acknowledges that researchers, even in instances of observation, will interpret the results, and two researchers observing the exact same situation may come to two different results. FULLTEXT01, 2007, takes note of the problem faced by Western researchers in collecting valid data from interviews in East Asia and suggests that further integration of intercultural communication and sociolinguistic literature could provide a more comprehensive account of the various challenges encountered by expatriates in foreign subsidiaries. FULLTEXT01, 2007:80. Kaur and Woofit claim that it is necessary to study ELF in real-life situations to be able to reach a satisfactory understanding of the misunderstandings that may occur. Kaur 2011:98, Woofit 2005:40. 3.2 Data collection. In order to understand how communication functions within the global company, in this case study, the data were collected within the company's offices in Sweden and in China. Sound recordings were made of conversations in business meetings and one-on-one interviews. The device used to record the conversations was an Olympus digital voice recorder VN731 PC. There were 7 meetings and 8 interviews, totaling 6 hours and 11 minutes of recorded data. 11. The meetings were predominantly face-to-face encounters, 4 hours 41 minutes, but there were occasions of Skype meetings, 1 hour 30 minutes. Misunderstandings, communication strategies and other relevant information were then transcribed and analyzed. The purpose of conducting interviews following the business meetings was to learn how the participants perceived their communication exchanges, whether or not they felt that there were any particular misunderstandings, to investigate if they consciously use communication strategies in order for the communication to be successful and for them to provide any comments or reflections on their communication with one another more generally. The interviews were voluntary and held in a one-on-one environment to enable the participants to talk freely without the fear of embarrassment and according to the advantages mentioned in Section 3.1. The interview questions are presented in Appendix B and longer examples of the interviews in Appendix C. The material was collected at the company's offices in Sweden and in China. In Kaur's 2011 study, the recordings of the data were not made by the researcher but by randomly chosen participants and in the absence of the researcher. Worth noting is that the results in the present case study may have been affected by the fact that an observer was present. 3.3 Company. The company is a leading global developer and supplier of technologies, automation and services for the pulp, paper, and energy industries. It has more than 12,000 employees and operates in some 30 countries worldwide. Their net sales in 2015 were approximately €2.9 billion, information from the company's website. For this paper, 1 Swedish and 1 Chinese office were chosen to take part in the study. In the Chinese office, the manager has implemented a visual management communication system in order to make the communication and information flow more smoothly. This was a conscious decision from the manager because he felt there was a need to improve the communication within the company and to make the meetings more comprehensible and efficient. Part of the challenges in communication is caused by the intercultural and language challenges the company faces. The manager is a Nordic male person working in the China office. The visual factory consists of boards with information for each ongoing project. Its visual, written, symbolic color-coded information makes it easy to follow the projects and makes the employees always on the alert if a problem has occurred. The system is influenced By traffic lights, green indicating no problems, yellow indicating some concerns that need to 12. Be dealt with, and red indicating major problems. The information is easily accessible to anyone who is involved in the projects and who needs to keep up with the information at all times. This system could well be looked upon as a conscious communication strategy from the management's point of view to increase the clarity in the communication within the company and to decrease misunderstandings. The manager points to this by explaining that by implementing this kind of visual system, employees cannot claim they were unaware of this information. It is each employee's responsibility to ensure they are up to date with the information on each project. 3.4 Participants. The informants, i.e. the participants, in the conversations were all business employees in the same company. They either worked in the Swedish or Chinese branch of the global company. The interviewees consisted of a total of 8 participants, where there were 4 Nordic, 2 women, 2 men, and 4 Chinese, 1 woman, 3 men. For a survey of the 8 informants, see Table 1, N stands for Nordic and C for Chinese. Table 1. Survey of participants, gender, position in the company. Woman, man, top leader, manager, project manager. N1XX. N2XX. N3XX. N4XX. C1XX. C2XX. C3XX. C4XX. 3.5 Ethical considerations. The participants in this study were informed about the purpose of the study prior to the recordings and they signed a consent form, see Appendix A. There was also a confidentiality agreement on the part of Karlstad University and myself, as well as the supervisor of the study, kept at the company. Any confidential information regarding the company's business dealings, partners or clients was excluded from the data, as the purpose of the study was to 13. Look at the potential misunderstandings and communication strategies used in the oral communication between the participants. Individual names and the name of the company are therefore not revealed given this assurance of confidentiality. For analysis and results. The study showed that on the whole, there were neither a large number of misunderstandings, nor were there any particularly serious misunderstandings with respect to the company's business aims and objectives. It was observed that the participants had a high level of awareness of the potential for misunderstandings and implemented, individually, a range of strategies to guard against misunderstandings in their linguistic communication. Awareness on the part of participants that their linguistic communication was being studied may have made them more conscious of their own communication and promoted a desire to ensure they had been understood. In addition, the fact that the management is very much aware of the negative consequences of misunderstandings for productivity and that it works actively to avoid them through strategies such as the visual communication strategies described in 3.3, is also likely to help minimize the negative impact of linguistic misunderstandings. However, it was apparent that scope for misunderstandings remain, as it was not always clear that participants had indeed understood one another's messages in the business meetings recorded, despite the conscious use on the part of employees of strategies to minimize linguistic misunderstandings. In this section, linguistic misunderstandings will be presented in 4.1, followed by language barriers and the potential broker in 4.2. The KISS principle and other communication strategies will be presented in 4.3, active listening in 4.4, the participants' own awareness of the importance of successful communication in 4.5 and face-saving devices in 4.6. The examples will be illustrated by numbered transcripts from the data collected. 4.1 Linguistic misunderstandings. In 1. From a face-to-face meeting, there is an example of a misunderstanding between two participants. It seems that the differences in pronunciation in 1 create the potential for misunderstandings. The Visual Management Board helps the participants to resolve the issue. 1. Chinese, we are /hot ID / of schedule. Nordic, but still green color? But you have to fix that. Chinese, yes, ahead. Nordic, it should be yellow. You said you were behind. 14. Chinese, no, no. Ahead. Not behind. Chinese, ahead. Nordic, must be some problem with my hearing. I thought you said behind. Chinese and Nordic, laughs. In 1, the cause of the misunderstanding seems to be due to pronunciation differences. It is also clear during this meeting that the Visual Management Board helps the parties to realize there is a misunderstanding. During the conversation, the manager pointed to the board, indicating his expectation that it should be the color code yellow as he hears the employee stating they are behind. As a result, the participants pursued the issue to clarify their misunderstanding. Several of the interviewees in the company expressed that visual, nonverbal communication is one of the main features of successful communication and an important strategy to clarify the message and to make sure that the listener has understood the intended meaning. Abbreviated speech which is grammatically unclear can also cause misunderstandings. In 2. The choice of the preposition for by the Nordic instead of to seems to cause a misunderstanding because it sounds like from. In 2, the meeting was also face-to-face. 2. Chinese, we received an email regarding the sales. Scandinavian, for who? Chinese, oh, it was from. Scandinavian, no, no. I know who it was from. I am asking for who? In 2, it is difficult to determine exactly what causes the misunderstanding. It could be pronunciation or linguistic competence. For example, the Nordic speaker's choice of the preposition for, rather than to whom could have caused confusion for the Chinese speaker. Additionally, the Nordic could have been more clear, for whom was the email intended? To whom was the email sent, or even who was the email sent to? However, irrespective of the reasons for misunderstandings, it can be seen in both examples, 1 and 2, that as soon as the participants realize that a misunderstanding has occurred, they find a way to try to clarify the information being communicated and come to a mutual understanding. It might be worth pointing out here that in 2, the Nordic speaker would be likely to assume that the misunderstanding has occurred due to poor listening comprehension on the part of the Chinese employee. However, one could argue that Swenglish grammar on the part of the Nordic was also to blame. As a Swedish researcher, it is easy to privilege Nordic English over Chinese English, given that grammatical, lexical, and pronunciation errors are sometimes 15. Made by a majority of speakers with a certain linguistic background. The use of an incorrect preposition can easily create misunderstandings for a listener who does not share the same native language. 4.2 Language barriers and the potential for brokers. Despite the fact that the participants lack a mutual first language and, as raised in 2.2, share the same business terminology, the language barriers are evident. As one manager, N2, 8, points out, the Swedish-based employees usually try to contact one of the other Nordic on site in China to discuss their businesses to avoid dealing with their Chinese colleagues. Their Nordic counterparts in China are left to participate in any necessary dialogue with the Chinese face-to-face. In such cases there is the potential for the creation of brokers, which can have both positive and negative consequences for a company as discussed in section 2.5. In line with Kadushin's 2007 Definition of brokers, 1 Nordic project manager, and 3. Makes similar reflections and explains that there are a few Chinese managers that handle the cross-cultural conversations because of their knowledge of English. Despite Kadushin's warning that brokers could start using communication for profit, Kadushin 2007:57, the project manager, and 3, in this study clarifies that in her experience, these communication brokers are convenient and non-negative for the communication flow. 4.3 The KISS principle and other communication strategies. In the recorded data, there are many examples of communication strategies used by the participants in order to establish that the other party has understood the intended meaning. The KISS principle was identified, indirectly, by the participants themselves. Several participants, C1, C2, and 1, and 2, in this case study pointed out that one key concern in the communication is to keep to the point and to keep the message short and simple without using excessive information that may cause the receivers to lose track of the most important and relevant information in the message. For example, the brevity in 3, along with the use of repetition and paraphrasing, ensures that the receiver has understood the message. The KISS principle is in 3, directly in line with the Gricean manner maxim presented in section 2.4. In 3, the meeting was a face-to-face meeting. 3. Nordic, how many? Chinese, 158. Nordic, 158. 158. Chinese, yes. 8 Nordic participant 2, see table 1. 16. 1 Chinese manager, C4, highlights the importance of being understood and explains that he speaks slowly and clearly when he comes to the important part. Then, I also ask, is it clear for you? This way I make sure that they have understood. I often feel that others have not understood well, C4. This strategy also embraces the KISS principle, by simplifying and clearly articulating the message at a critical point. With respect to simplification, 1 Nordic manager, and 2, states that speaking a reduced English is very important. It is an art to be able to speak bad English. Also, using the same words and not to speak with a varied vocabulary. Stay to the point. Again, this is in line with the KISS principle, keeping the information short and simple and to the point. This also reflects Boehringer et al.'s 2008:27 definition of BELF as a reduced English with the sole purpose of the communication being for the parties to reach a shared understanding, as mentioned in section 2.1. The KISS principle is, indirectly, also mentioned as a key concern for the misunderstandings by another Chinese manager, C2. 4. In English there are so many words to explain the same thing. Better to use the most common words that we know. Just makes it easier. The conversation purpose is to understand each other. We don't care about which words you are using or if there are some grammatical correct or not. We are just trying to understand each other. In 5, a Skype meeting, the listener first asks a follow-up question in order to clarify the sentence that is not understood. Secondly, the listener avoids the topic and lastly, changes the topic entirely without reaching a mutual understanding. It would seem that the Nordic uses this strategy in order to move the conversation forward. Also, because of the nature of the topic, one could assume that the Nordic did not find it relevant to add more information. In order to reach a mutual understanding, since the topic of vacation is not interpreted to be of high value, this choice of leaving the topic can be interpreted in the framework of the Gricean maxims, 1, and 3, mentioned in section 2.4. The Nordic participant is here making the contribution as informative as is required and is turning to the relevant information. 5. Nordic, X is on vacation. I'm not sure if you heard that. Chinese, yes I say, what kind of vacation, when will he be on vacation? Nordic, sorry, what did you say? Chinese, X is not on vacation. Nordic, yeah. Chinese, X is not here. Nordic, yes yes. Chinese, so how will we? 17. Nordic, yeah, I was thinking if we could go through the Y project, Short notice. Grice's maxims, 3, and 4, were also, indirectly, identified as important in an interview with a Chinese manager. C3 Scandinavians are usually more general. It is better to be precise and to the point. Not to generalize but point to the exact and specific problem, rather than stating problems in the past. One passing comment by the manager, C3, seems to hint at a key cultural difference between the two parties. Scandinavians look for the solutions rather than focusing on who is to blame for the occurrence of the problem. This remark would indicate that attributing blame is important in Chinese business culture, and employees are therefore likely to communicate in ways that avoid taking responsibility for mistakes, given its very negative socio-cultural repercussions. Another Chinese participant, C2, stated that honesty and showing respect and being polite to each other is the basic principle for a successful communication. Respect the cultural differences. Respect each other's religion and privacy. In China there is no privacy. The Chinese don't care so much. The Scandinavians are much more private. The key word here is respect, and this can be linked to the Chinese politeness maxims presented in 2.5. In 6, co-workers in two different offices in Sweden and China were talking to each other using Skype. Here the Nordic uses confirmation questions as a communication strategy to make sure that they have clearly understood the message. The Chinese speaker asks to stop to make it clear as a means of indicating that the message has not been understood clearly. The Chinese participant then repeats the question, which is yet another communication strategy. 6. Nordic, I would like to see this progress reporting on a weekly basis, to make sure that we are on track and that no issues are left not solved. So. Who will send this updated progress report on a weekly basis? Chinese, HRMOK. This is important, let S stop for a while, make it clear. Nordic, yeah. Chinese, first of all, you like to get weekly based report, we have talked last time. Right? Nordic, yeah. Chinese, one moment please. Stops and talks to the co-workers in the room, is it okay for everybody? Chinese, to Nordic, hello. Okay, we agreed. Weekly report is okay for China, we can send. Nordic, okay good. 18. 4.4 Active listening. In 7, 8, and 9, the co-workers were talking to each other using Skype. Here one could argue that the Chinese use yes as an act of active listening as defined in section 2.3. The Nordic, however, could interpret the yes as an indicator that the co-worker has in fact agreed to the information in 7, and has understood the message in 8 and 9. In 9, the response yes to whether everyone knows what to do is immediately followed by a statement that shows that they have not fully understood. 7. Nordic, have you seen that? I have just put together some simple spreadsheet that could be used for project report purposes. Chinese, yes. Yeah. Nordic, you think it could be useful? Chinese, yes. Yeah. My personally sorry missed this message, but other team members they have seen. It's okay, we can use. Nordic, okay. 8. Nordic, do you get my message? Chinese, yes. Yes. I understand the need of this kind of report. Can I say again my question? For example. 9. Nordic, so everyone knows what to do now? Chinese, yes. But I forget one very important question. The issue of yes was also raised in an interview with a Nordic participant, N1. In line with Lustig and Kuster, 2013:280, the manager expressed the view that receiving a yes from the Chinese does not necessarily mean agreement, be it agreement to get a particular task done, or agreement with the opinion being stated. Whereas the Nordic would interpret a yes as an indicator that the other party has understood and agreed to, or with, whatever was being requested or said. The Chinese, it seemed, were using the word yes to convey that they had merely heard the message, N1. Whilst yes may indicate active listening on the part of the Chinese, it may also be a way to simply end a discussion. One Nordic manager, N1, stated that the answer given is often not an answer to the actual question. Why you have to pay attention, because it is not always because they have not understood, it may also be because they do not want to answer the real question. 19. 4.5 Awareness of the importance of successful communication. In 10 and 11, both the Nordic and the Chinese participants initiate remarks that show awareness of problems with the communication, and that good communication is of high importance to the company's business dealings. In both examples, the participants emphasize that an open dialogue is of high value. 10. Nordic, also I would like to emphasize that key importance here is communication. An open communication. So for example, if there is problems during the project, please contact XX. We cannot force support and do things if we are involved in this. But if we are not informed and we get this information too late, there will be huge consequences in the project. This we have to work together in and avoid that there is no surprises coming, and because problems we will face and those we will manage if we work together. It is very important that you are open with every challenge you will face in this work. Chinese, very good. We fully agree. 11. Chinese, communication is key for our good delivery. Nordic, and also, it might be that you face questions that you are not 100% sure of. Please raise those questions because we are in the same team, so we can support with that as well. 4.6 Saving face. As mentioned in 2.5, there are different interpretations of the reasons for misunderstandings. And this is of high relevance to this case study. In fact, several participants highlighted the cultural differences as an important aspect in the communication. In the interviews, face was highlighted as an important aspect that the Nordic participants were aware of in their communication with the Chinese. An example given was that a Nordic project manager, N4, would not, in a group discussion, ask which one of the Chinese employees would take responsibility for a task. She would instead ask them to discuss amongst themselves and get back to her with the person who will be responsible for the task, when they had decided in private. The view that communication is easier if the parties already know one another was also expressed by a Chinese manager, C1. A Chinese employee, C2, stated that the cultural differences were of relevance in the beginning when the parties did not know each other. But after years of working together, they have an understanding of the cultural differences. Several of the participants stated that in order to reach a mutual understanding, some aspects of their communication were of special relevance. Meeting in person, so-called face. 20. To face discussions, and already knowing the person they were interacting with, were some of the aspects that were stated as important for the communication to be successful, C1, C4, and 1. And 2. Confirmation emails and other nonverbal communication, such as drawings and pictures, were also mentioned as important tools, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, C1, C2. Other strategies that they named were confirmation and repetition, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, C1, C2. This is in line with Kaur's study, which showed that in addition to self-repairs, other preemptive measures include the use of various interactional practices such as repetition, confirmation, and clarification requests and the like, which allow the participants to check, monitor and clarify understanding, Kaur 2011:98. Also, having one person as a communication broker was stated as important, and 4. 5. Conclusion. In the study and during the research, it became obvious that the topic of communication was of high relevance for this global company. Successful communication among the participants, i.e. co-workers, was pointed out and highlighted as an important factor for fulfilling commitments to the company's customers. A Nordic manager visiting the China office described the misunderstandings and communication in a clear manner, which shows its key concern. If we don't understand each other, there are conflicts. However, when we understand each other, we don't have any conflicts. Misunderstandings due to language barriers are the main reason conflicts occur. These conflicts are unnecessary, as if we understand each other they will not arise. As this study has shown, misunderstandings did occur between the Chinese and Nordic participants when they were using English as a lingua franca. However, whilst these misunderstandings may have had the potential to cause confusion or delays in meeting business objectives down the line, they were identified early and resolved prior to decisions being made or actions being taken on the basis of the misunderstood information. In addition, the present study was based on data from a variety of different projects at different stages, rather than following one company project over a period of time. It was not possible, therefore, to observe the long-term effects of particular misunderstandings. Hence, the long-term effects of the misunderstandings were not tracked in this study. Given this, it was difficult to analyze the impact the misunderstandings may have had on the company's business dealings. 21. In the study, communication strategies were frequently used by both the Nordic and Chinese participants with both the general purpose of minimizing the likelihood of misunderstandings and with the specific purpose of clarifying a suspected misunderstanding. Self-awareness of the use of communication strategies was demonstrated in the interviews, where the participants explained that they actively use specific techniques in the communication with their Chinese or Nordic counterparts. Common strategies that were explained were: 1. Keeping it short and to the point, 2. Visual communication backing up the verbal communication, and 3. Follow-up questions. In the recorded data alone, it was difficult to establish whether the misunderstandings that did occur were due to cultural differences. However, the participants pointed out that they are very aware of the cultural differences in their communication with each other, and they believe that cultural differences may lead to misunderstandings. To show respect for each other's differences was raised as an important factor in the intercultural interactions. In the case study, there was the potential for misunderstandings caused by the different ways the parties use yes. It is suggested that there is a potential of reaching a higher level of mutual understanding and fewer misunderstandings, if the Nordics are aware of the Chinese using yes as an act of active listening, rather than as a confirmation word. Yes may be used as an interjection, meaning yes, I have heard you, but not necessarily understood you, or agree with you. Despite an awareness of cultural differences, ingrained behavioral patterns dictating what it means to be polite would seem to nevertheless hinder some of the Chinese speakers from direct responses which might appear rude in accordance with the maxims outlined in the background. For example, there were numerous occasions in the recordings where Chinese speakers replied with a yes. However, their following remarks, comments or questions did not seem to support their yes as being an indicator that they had understood the intended meaning of the sender. It should be noted that this view in many ways privileges the cultural values of the Nordic participants. It may be found that it implies that there is something deficient in the manner in which the Chinese speakers are utilizing English, and that the Chinese are therefore responsible for resulting misunderstandings. Rather than just being irritated with the Chinese use of yes in this way, it may be useful for the Nordics to gain a deeper understanding of the positive intentions of the Chinese with respect to their use of yes, and learn more about how to discover the true intention without causing offense or eliciting a response based mostly on politeness or face saving. The results of this case study in regards to the yes aspect could well be a key for improving the intercultural communication between Nordic and Chinese business people. 22. The focus of this study was to establish whether there were misunderstandings between the Nordic and Chinese business people and understand the nature of these misunderstandings. It was not within the scope of this study to establish if there were any misunderstandings that affected the company's business dealings over a longer period of time. It is therefore suggested that further research could follow a specific business project from start to finish in order to analyze in what way misunderstandings may affect business aims and objectives. 23. References: Bjorg, Ankari, 2010. Conflict or Cooperation, the Use of Backchanneling in ELF Negotiations. English for Specific Purposes, 29, 191-203. Bolton, Kingsley and Gradall, David, 2012. English in China Today. English Today, 28, 3-9. Brown, Penelope and Levinson, Stephen, 1987. Politeness, Some Universals in Language. Cambridge, Cambridge University Press. Boehringer Heike, Hulmbauer, Cornelia and Siedelhofer Barbara, 2008. Introducing English as a Lingua Franca, ELF Precursor and Partner in Intercultural Communication. Synergies. Europe 3, 25-36. Castry, Noel, Kitchen, Rob and Rogers Alastair, 2016. Dictionary of Human Geography. Oxford University Press. Available at http://www.oxfordreference.com. Charles, Mergeli Isa, 2007. Language Matters in Global Communication. Article based on Aura. Lecture, October 2006. J. Arnold of Business Communication 44, 3260-282. Denskum, Martin, 2014. The Good Research Guide, for Small-Scale Research Projects. Maidenhead, Berkshire, McGraw-Hill Education. Ellis, Rod, 1985. Understanding Second Language Acquisition. Oxford, Oxford University Press. Gu, Ueguo. 1990. Politeness Phenomenon in Modern Chinese. Journal of Pragmatics 14. 237-257. Huang, Yongliang, 2008. Politeness Principle in Cross-Culture Communication. English. Language Teaching 1, 96 to 101. Kadushin, Charles, 2012. Understanding Social Networks, Theories, Concepts, and Findings. Oxford, Oxford University Press. Kaur, Jagdish, 2011. Intercultural Communication in English as a Lingua Franca, Some Sources of Misunderstanding. Intercultural Pragmatics, 8, 11-176. Lustish, Myron W. and Kuster, Jolene, 2013. Intercultural Competence, Interpersonal Communication Across Cultures. Boston, Pearson. Moranen, Anna, 2006. Signaling and Preventing Misunderstanding in English as Lingua Franca Communication. International Journal of the Sociology of Language. 2006, 177. 123 to 150. Peltokorpi, VESA, 2007. Intercultural Communication Patterns and Tactics, Nordic Expatriates in Japan. International Business Review, 16, 168-82. Scollin, Ron, Scollin Wong Suzanne and Jones, Rodney, 2012. Intercultural Communication, A Discourse Approach. Seidlhofer, Barbara, 2005. English as a Lingua Franca. ELT Journal, 59, 339-341. 24. Selinker, Larry, 1972. Interlanguage. International Review of Applied Linguistics, 10, 209. 224. Woopfit, Robin, 2005. Conversation Analysis and Discourse Analysis, A Comparative and Critical Introduction. London, Sage. Yang, Dong, and Guy Fengpeng, 2010. Chinese Learners' Communication Strategies. Research. Cross-Cultural Communication, 6, 156-81. Ewell, George, 2010. The Study of Language. Cambridge, Cambridge University Press. 25. Appendix A. Consent Form. Using English as a Lingua Franca. Informed Consent Note. I have been informed by Johanna Hartung of the overall aims of the research project on using English as a Lingua Franca. I understand that the data, recordings of conversations, will be used interpretively in publications, conference presentations, and other outlets by the researcher or any other researcher with whom she might collaborate in the future. The data will be anonymized so that no part of it can be traced to any individual in the recording. I have been guaranteed complete confidentiality and anonymity by the researcher, and I have been given the right to see any paper prior to its publication. I have also been given the right to withdraw from the study at any stage. Signed date 26. Appendix B. Interview questions. 1. Do you find it difficult to understand the Chinese or Scandinavians? If so, why? 2. Do you usually engage in small talk, informally, prior to specific business discussion? Or do you tend to go straight to the point? 3. Do you find it easier to communicate with the Chinese or Scandinavians, if you have had contact with that particular person before? 4. Are there any particular words or phrases that commonly cause problems? 5. What do you do to make sure that the other person has understood your intended meaning? 6. What are your general reflections on the communication? 7. Do the cultural differences affect the communication? If so, how? 8. What are the easiest aspects of the communication? 9. Do you have any suggestions as to how communication could be improved? 10. Any additional comments or reflections? 27. Appendix C. Examples from interviews. S1, 1. One of the difficulties in the communication is connected to cultural differences. The Chinese are using images when talking, rather than answering and speaking clearly about the topic. They use images. This is typical Chinese expressions that is translated and could therefore be difficult to understand. The Chinese tend to talk around the question. Also, often the answer given is not an answer the actual question. But you have to pay attention, because it is not always because they have not understood, it may also be because they do not want to answer the real question. Another cultural difference is that we have completely different kind of humor. Laughing is one issue. In Scandinavia, if someone have an accident, it is not polite to laugh. But in China, people tend to laugh when they are not sure what they should do. It is not being rude. Timekeeping is another cultural difference. We think differently when it comes to this issue. If there is a deadline and you ask if they are ready, they will say no problem. In China, it is not late until it has passed the deadline. Whereas in Scandinavia, people would in advance point out that this project needs more time. C1, 2. Different cultures is one aspect to consider in the communication. Even logic is different. It is different if I have met them earlier. Then it makes the communication easier. The Scandinavians are usually more general. It is better to be precise and to the point. Not generalize but point to the exact and specific problem, rather than stating problems in the past. However, this is not a cultural difference. It is more a way of talking. Culture gives some influence on communication, but for Scandinavian people, culture helps our communication. When we look for the solutions, Scandinavians look for the solutions rather than focusing on who is to blame for the occurrence of the problem. Make other people understand you is important. When I come to the important part, I will talk slowly and clearly. Then, I also ask, is it clear for you? This way I make sure that they have understood. I often feel that others have not understood well. S4, 3. I have a few Chinese managers that handle the conversations because of their knowledge of English. This is convenient and we get to know each other because we are used to talking to each other. 28. S2, 4. Speaking a reduced English is very important. It is an art to be able to speak a bad English. Also, using the same words and not to speak with a varied vocabulary. Stay to the point. C2, 5. The cultural differences were of relevance in the beginning when we didn't know each other. But after years of working together, we have an understanding of the cultural differences. Now we have learned how to communicate with each other. Between the Chinese people, you cannot speak out straightforward what you expect. But with the Scandinavians, you can speak out clearly. This way the conversation is more simple and easily understood. Even when it is positive or negative, there is an understanding that it is nothing personal. The typical Chinese way would be to be more concerned with the feelings of the other. This is a trust issue. If you trust the person, you can speak openly. The Chinese usually think a lot before speaking. I prefer to talk openly. The reason for misunderstandings is in English there are so many words to explain the same thing. Better to use the most common words that we know. Just makes it easier. The conversation purpose is to understand each other. We don't care about which words you are using or if there are some grammatical correct or not. We are just trying to understand each other. Be honest and show respect and be polite to each other is the basic principle for a successful communication. And respect the cultural differences. Respect each other's religion and privacy. In China there is no privacy. The Chinese don't care so much. The Scandinavians are much more private. They don't want to talk about money, etc.